the Department of Justice and my office have reached an agreement in principle that will help us guide us as we implement next steps.
It feels like this cloud hanging over you. We can't get anything right.
We were being killed at will, and there was no one that was able to do anything about it until the feds got in here.
Good evening from Louisville Metro Hall. I'm Isaiah Kim Martinez. From reckoning to reform, the city of Louisville has been in flux since protesters lined the streets of downtown years ago. Now here in 2023, we stand at an inflection point. Will we see brighter days ahead or the same levels of crime and corruption that have plagued this city for so long? On the table is an agreement that could decide our city's fate. For a glimpse into our future, senior photojournalist Alyssa Newton and I traveled across state lines.
Here in New Orleans, we're different. We're unique.
Yes, I know it. Hallelujah, I love it so.
We don't shake hands, we hug.
Only in New Orleans, y'all.
We all know what high school each other went to.
We could have been anywhere else in the world today.
Small, big city is what I call it.
But we all here right now.
12 shootings, 24 hours, and you had said to me, what?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a carbon copy of New Orleans these days. We have a real crime spike. People are very concerned about it and what to do about it.
It often takes some awful event for that to happen.
No justice!
And it sounds like that's happened in Louisville.
Prosecute the police!
Are there parallels here?
They seem very similar, and we've had a long-standing culture of police misconduct.
So you hear the name Breonna Taylor. What comes to mind for you?
Oh, just the pain. Just the horror and the pain.
No one knows any better the crimes of the police, but the people that have to live under that kind of condition.
But that you guys already knew.
Yes, exactly.
So where does that leave us?
Still fighting.
12 years ago, the city of New Orleans also had a news conference that changed the course of their police department. Here was ours.
I am pleased to announce that the city of Louisville has signed an agreement in principle with the Department of Justice. This agreement commits the city and LMPD to work with the Justice Department, the community, police officers, and other stakeholders to address the problems that we have identified.
March 8th of this year changed everything for Louisville Metro Police. The Department of Justice found a pattern of systemic discrimination, unjustified use of force, and search warrants containing misleading and sometimes false information.
The descriptions of police misconduct and people looking the other way, all of that is unacceptable.
The DOJ says LMPD officers routinely use force when no threat is posed to them. DOJ officials tell us it's not just LMPD that has failed to adequately train and supervise, saying Metro government has fallen short too. Like New Orleans, now that the DOJ's investigation is over, the federal government is going to be supervising our city government and our police department. The city and the feds will come to an agreement called a consent decree. It's basically a federal court order requiring changes from our police department to become a constitutional model. By entering this agreement, the department and city are now legally accountable, and LMPD will need to prove to the DOJ that they're improving and can sustain progress. The agreement could include deadlines for police to hit different goals, all under the watchful eye of the federal government. New Orleans has experienced this all firsthand and has seen results.
This is where the famous jazz that New Orleans is known for started.
In the heart of the Treme neighborhood,
one of the oldest communities in New Orleans,
lies this center, draped in artwork and history.
The community leadership actually emanates from this spot here. Jerome Smith, one of the original freedom riders, decided this is where he wanted to put an institution for black youth in New Orleans.
Only appropriate.
We had town hall meetings.
It's the spot W.C. Johnson and other community leaders drafted their own blueprint.
We got their ideas, we got their input.
To end police brutality in the city.
It was an accomplishment that the people here in New Orleans was able to realize, and I hope and trust that the people of Louisville will be able to realize their dreams too.
The People's Consent Decree. That's what I'm holding right here.
Yes.
Signed ceremonially back in late 2010, it set the stage for the official contract the city now lives under.
To change the attitudes and behaviors of the New Orleans Police Department.
Overseen by the Justice Department, the consent decree required NOPD
The problems in here are systemic.
to overhaul its policies and procedures, bolstering supervision.
For too long, the department was indifferent. These things were not secret. Anyone who lived here knew about it. The problem was you could not get accountability.
In the last 10 plus years, well-known civil rights attorney Mary Howell has seen improvements.
They're way down on officer-involved shootings. We're way down on problematic high-speed chases.
NOPD has also adopted peer intervention programs, training officers to act the moment they see fellow cops stepping out of line,
Having it in the consent decree was essential.
guaranteeing no retaliation.
Officers have embraced it. A big drop in the kinds of complaints from citizens.
The consent decree has spanned across multiple police chiefs, including interim superintendent Michelle Woodfork.
We had to change the culture here.
At the helm since December 2022.
It was a need for close and effective supervision. It was a need for better technology and to hold people accountable.
The consent decree has absolutely been a good thing overall.
Mike Pearlstein, an investigative reporter at her sister station, WWL-TV in New Orleans,
Having covered a few evolutions of this police department,
notes a culture shift.
the police department I was covering in the 90s is not the same police department, not the same people.
Getting rid of the bad apples, resistant to reform.
And they would not think to see abuse by a fellow officer and not report it. Now it's part of the ethos of your department, which is a great thing.
A more constitutional police force, yes, but reducing crime, the #1 goal written in the consent decree, has been a failed initiative.
It's expensive, it's time consuming, and there are problems with police retention.
Has it affected morale?
I believe it has.
It's kind of like a vicious cycle.
A department hundreds of officers short now insists the very agreement designed to make the city safer has shackled their ability to do just that. Louisville will add to almost a dozen other cities currently under federal oversight. The Justice Department has ongoing investigations into police departments in Minneapolis, Phoenix, Mount Vernon, New York, Worcester, Massachusetts, and Oklahoma City, just to name a few. Louisiana State Police and the New York City Police Department's Special Victims Division are also under watch. It often takes anywhere from 6 to 11 years for cities to reach compliance, with a federal judge making the final call. New Orleans is still waiting after more than a decade, paying upwards of $7 million a year to fund its consent decree. Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg's office says they're awaiting a first draft of the consent decree from the Justice Department before they can begin hashing out terms. Now remember, until they reach an agreement and it's signed by a federal judge, we won't know exactly what's promised. Still though, Louisville can learn a lot from watching what's happened in New Orleans, as a seemingly never-ending contract has become a burden to some. As night falls in the French Quarter, New Orleans police officers patrol each intersection. The city's eyes and ears struggling to keep up with the highest murder rate per capita in the country. Shattered windows.
Crime has increased dramatically.
Glaring as we walked.
And there's many factors at play. Certainly one of them is the lack of manpower.
Eric Hessler,
the attorney for the Police Association of New Orleans,
says the agreement between the city and the federal government has become a never-ending battle.
They've accomplished the task. The monitors seem to come back and say, no, you forgot to dot this I and cross this T, so go back and do it again.
Longtime journalist Mike Pearlstein,
investigative reporter, WWL-TV New Orleans,
has seen it firsthand.
To say this department is limping along might be an understatement.
NOPD,
mass departure,
is hundreds of officers short, and those leaving tell the story.
They explained the consent decree that we're walking on eggshells.
They tell you that?
Oh yeah, cited in the actual exit interviews, some of them documented in writing.
Earlier in this special report,
We had to change the culture here.
we showed you NOPD's improved policies and procedures over the last 10 years under the Justice Department's watch.
We believe we are at substantial compliance.
Now, Interim Police Chief Michelle Woodfork feels her team has proved ready to move on to the self-monitoring phase.
And we just want the opportunity to show that we can sustain those reforms and become more compliant. We say we're at 86%.
But the feds have argued otherwise.
They say we're at 66% compliance.
You don't believe these are all checked off?
They're not checked off. In fact, we led the nation again in homicides last year.
Civil rights attorney Mary Howell says the job is not finished. In a quarterly report earlier this year, consent decree monitors called 2022 a, quote, challenging year for the NOPD, noting slippage in their ability to sustain reforms implemented. Then, in April, a response to the city's motion to terminate the consent decree highlighted two major areas of concern. First, noting officers failed to provide adequate justification for nearly 1/3 of pat-downs or frisks. And then, noting disparities for people of color in vehicle exits, firearm pointing, and response times. That motion ultimately was denied.
Consent decrees need to end at some time, but you need to have confidence that we're on sound footing. And I will tell you, I don't have that confidence right now.
Do you think it will ever get there?
No.
Activist W.C. Johnson sees work to be done.
With them here, it keeps them from running roughshod over the citizens. It keeps them from just killing us at will.
How do you approach something like that as far as putting an end to it?
It's very difficult. Well, the federal government can sort of be the 800-pound gorilla.
Mike Magner
I was an assistant U.S. attorney here in New Orleans for 20 years.
prosecuted a number of police brutality cases post-Katrina.
This is a long-haul problem and must be addressed in a long-haul way.
But he admits at this point the costs may be starting to outweigh the benefits.
The city's having a very difficult time hiring new police officers and keeping the good ones that they have.
The lack of officers is hindering the department's ability to be in compliance. But at the same time, the lack of officers is because of some perceived onerous conditions of the consent decree itself. It can work maybe too well.
After so long, I think it starts to wear. When are we ever going to do enough?
I don't know.
City leaders pleading to finish this chapter.
I think we should have had it closed behind us already. I think we're going to continue for quite a while, though, unfortunately.
And a story that appears far from complete. Again, we don't know yet what reforms Louisville's consent decree will include, but the Justice Department did post 36 recommendations for our city and police in their March report. It's a pretty long list, but here are the highlights. With Breonna Taylor in mind, there are several recommended changes to the search warrant process and execution. They recommend keeping documentation of every stop. And as we saw during the 2020 protests, they want officers to have better training on protests and demonstrations. Another thing the DOJ found missing from LMPD, a true crisis intervention team. And for the people of Louisville, they want the department to create a better process for people to file complaints. For the officers themselves, the DOJ recommends better health and wellness programs. There's no telling how many of these changes will be mandated in the final version of the consent decree. Back in April, Jefferson County Attorney Mike O'Connell told me it could take a year to a year and a half to complete negotiations.
It's going to be a really sweaty, tough process to get through, and then it ultimately will be taken down to a federal district court judge who will then preside over the enforcement of it.
The mayor's office tells us negotiations will be exclusively between Metro government and the DOJ, and the feds do not allow third parties a seat at the negotiating table. Community involvement has been at the center of real action and change here in Louisville, and that's essentially what folks in New Orleans are telling you to keep doing. Be the voice fighting for a better city. And as for city officials in New Orleans, their advice, don't be a stranger. Do you root for a city like Louisville?
Absolutely. I'm going to make the offer. Please reach out.
Be advised that Interim Superintendent Michelle Woodfork is now full command of the New Orleans Police Department.
From the outstretched hand of one interim police chief to another.
Sometimes you're not going to agree with everything that they want you to do.
Michelle Woodfork's message to LMPD,
So help me God.
So help me God.
and Jackie Gwynn Biloroyale.
I would say stay the course. If you want a better police department, just hang in there, stay in there.
But she also says, don't be afraid to push the DOJ to keep the fine print specific before it's too late.
Put in things that can be clear and measurable. Being able to say, hey, if you did 10 of these or if you reach this point in it, you're at this percentage. Partner with another city who has been through it, is going through it, so you won't make the same mistakes that they did. That's what I'm here for.
Go in with their eyes open. Plan for the long term to be able to muster the type of revenue they need to make these kind of changes.
The suggestion is for Louisville to learn from New Orleans' missteps.
If the community doesn't support it and the community is not in the table, I don't think you're going to be successful.
Have a clear avenue for the people's input.
We don't have as active a community participation provision in our consent decree as we should.
And most importantly,
For your people in Louisville,
we're told,
stay strong and keep the fight going.
don't give up.
Take a break, get some rest, come back and fight another day.
And our city hasn't waited to make changes. Metro government and LMPD started overhauling policies and procedures long before the DOJ findings came out.
Justice! This was a historic victory.
June 2020, in the wake of Breonna Taylor's death, Louisville's Metro Council approved a ban of no-knock warrants in the city. And then Mayor Greg Fisher announced all sworn officers must wear body cameras when executing any search warrants. In October 2020, an agreement was finalized between Kentucky State Police and LMPD, setting a precedent where state police takes over investigations of officer-involved shootings.
We're wanting an outside agency to investigate officer-involved shootings so that there's not an agency investing itself.
Then in December 2020, Fisher signed an ordinance that created a civilian review board. The board is designed to investigate complaints against officers, along with the Inspector General's office. And the reforms keep coming. As recently as May 2023, we are seeing more transparency.
I stand here today and again for my commitment with the mayor and my commitment to this police department and to my stance to always move forward with trust and transparency.
The city released the names of the officers and investigative files in the cases referenced in the DOJ report. Interim Police Chief Jackie Gwynn Biloroyale and Mayor Craig Greenberg announcing a new database that details each incident, the officers involved, arrest citations, information on formal investigations, and administrative reviews. Of the 62 cases, though, only 33 can be reopened and reviewed further. Well, adjustments have been made and laws have changed, but still today, people are calling for justice for those wronged by police. And as we close here tonight, a look at the discussions community members right here in Louisville have had with DOJ officials. We're talking about weeks of town hall meetings at local libraries, letting them know the issues you've seen and your ideas for solutions.
Well, the DOJ is back in town as they prepare to negotiate the consent decree with the city and LMPD.
To tell us what you would like to see.
Who's better to know what's needed?
The Black community already knew.
The best way to find out how to structure policing in a certain neighborhood is to ask the neighborhood.
Why would you unload 2 clips in his back? The police were not just. They shot him over 20-some times. I refuse to sacrifice another black life.
All those cases should be reviewed.
It's got to stop. It has to stop.
It's a culture thing, and that's not going to change overnight.
They had a list of things that they're wanting to initiate.
Lots of good ideas. They have created some successes. They are forcing citizens to think about how to have valid input in the system.
Yeah, I've got a lot of ideas. They said, now we're going to sit back and listen to you.
And hopefully something fruitful will come out of this.
Well, this issue can be a lot to take in, and some of you at home watching may feel this doesn't affect you. We'll say this, our trip to New Orleans, if it taught us anything, it's that there is a dark cloud over our city right now, but it's one we can clear if we make the right decisions moving forward. With senior photojournalist Alyssa Newton, I'm Isaiah Kim Martinez, WHAS 11 on your side.